It's unrelated, but I always wanted to know, why do morel mushrooms grow around burns?
That is such a great question. And you know what? That's the question that we've been asking for so long.
I love morel mushrooms.
I love morel mushrooms too. They are poisonous. Unless you cook them.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, boy, that's important to know.
Many people have died from morel mushrooms. Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
You don't want to cook morel mushrooms in a closed kitchen without ventilation. There are volatile compounds coming out of the morels, totally denatured in cooking, delicious. But many, many examples of this. In Japan, I was in Japan 15 years ago.
So if you don't have an overhead fan, don't fry morels in your kitchen.
You should open up the window, but just don't inhale the fumes.
Wow. I would have never imagined
The North
that.
American Mycological Association is the association for Canada, Mexico, and the United States. And there's a poison control group in that, and they collect all the details. It's namyco.org, namyco.org. And they're the go-to place. Ironically, because of HIPAA rules, the mycologists have been disconnected from the patients in the medical community because now there is a firewall between them. We can anonymize the case reports, but there's a firewall of information because of HIPAA and disclosures of patient conditions that has really inhibited the flow of information. Nevertheless, namyco.org, North American Mycological Association, NAMY.co.org, and my professor, Dr. Michael Bugh, is a giant, in consulting with for adverse effects in mushroom poisonings. So morels are delicious, but to answer your question, morel mycelium seems to be everywhere. And then for horse burns, and they come up.
Right.
Where were they before?
Right.
Well,
do they exist in places that don't have burns?
Yes.
But rarely.
No. We think all the time.
All the time.
We
but
think the morels,
very common amongst burns.
They're everywhere where forests are.
Right.
And when the forests burn, it knocks down all the competition.
Oh.
And it becomes very alkaline. And the absence of organic material and competitor fungi, the change in the pH. And so we think also from the Gaian hypothesis point of view, it's a great way of nature to rebound because they're scentful. They attract animals, they attract insects, and birds come in, drop seeds, and then they become an oasis point for the regeneration of an ecosystem. Oh. Never underestimate the intelligence of nature. And nature has figured this out. Nature does not exist in a vacuum. There's always these repopulation vectors happening, and it's collaborative. It's not competitive. There is competition between the fungi, but when the competitors are knocked down, then the morels come up.
That's fascinating. Another fascinating thing is that the largest living organism on Earth in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, Armillaria ostoii. Yeah. Some people call it Gallica, two different things. But, yeah, I flew over it. It's a 2,200 acre, basically a clear cut. It killed all the trees. In my book, Mycelium Running, I have the best photographs of the largest organism in the world. And I hired an airplane, and first time I couldn't see it because I was too low. Second time I had to spiral up.
Can you explain what it is to people?
It's a honey mushroom. It's a parasite on trees. It's edible. The honey mushrooms on hardwoods tend to taste better, but this one is on conifers. And comes up in clusters. It forms black rhizomorphs, black mycelium. It's called laminated root rot. Many listeners here know what that is. It kills fruit trees. But this is a marauding parasite that created a contiguous mat over 2,200 acres. And in this case, it killed all the trees, so they went ashen gray in color, and they dried out, and they're dead. Because of fire hazard from lightning strikes, the Forest Service came in, and they cut all the dead trees. And they created this beautiful outline of the largest mycelial mat in the world because you could see where the dead trees were.
Can we see what that looks like in an image?
It's also in Mycelium Running. But anyhow, that's an example. Now, it killed the trees. That's terrible. But it created grasslands for ungulates.
Right.
So deer and moose, elk can come in. So it's I think it's a way of this rebalancing of nature.
Right.
Where
you're dealing with millions and millions of acres.
Millions and millions of acres. There is a real big problem with the bark beetle right now. That's a problem. It's the ecosystems are shifting in response to stress. And, with our mind's view of only one lifetime, we're very myopic. I think we need to look at the 1,000-year. I mean, what is the lens of time that we actually look at ecosystems? What's the right lens to use? Depends upon your vested interests. As a human, as a deer, as an ecosystem, they could be very different.
Right. It's just such a fascinating thing. The largest known organism on Earth exists in the Pacific Northwest.
And it's one cell wall thick.
That's so nuts.
Think about its immune system.
You know what I found out recently that I had no idea? Aspen trees, when you see aspen trees, it's one plant.
Yeah, it's one contiguous thing. They're the two competitors for that title, by the way.
Isn't that nuts?
Yeah, they're the two competitors.
When you see these, I always thought when you see aspen forests that it's a bunch of different individual aspen trees.
Right.
Nope.
No, there's all sorts of amazing discoveries. Here's one that blows my mind, and I had to write it down because it's a new species. There is a fungus that's related to ergot. It's in the Clavicipitaceae, and it was found by a student at Western Virginia University. It is in morning glory seeds. It produces LSD.
Well, Terrence talked about that.
No, this is before Terrence.
No.
Terrence talked about
Terrence
morning
talked
glory.
about morning glory seeds and having psychedelic experiences.
It turns out it's a symbiotic fungus that's growing in there, and it's called Paraglandula clandestina.
And don't
What
they,
a great name, clandestina, the clandestine.
Don't they do something to commercial morning glory seeds to make sure that people don't trip on them?
I don't know.
I think they do. I think that's another thing that Terrence was talking about, how gross it was that they alter morning glory seeds because they knew that people were using them for psychedelics.
Well, if they sterilized them or used a fungicide, that would make sense.
Yeah.
But a graduate student, need to give her credit, is at Western Virginia University, Corinne Hazel,
Here
and
it is.
Daniel
Jamie's got it.
Panion. Yes.
There it is.
Look how young she is.
Very young.
She made a discovery heretofore unknown to science, and not only it produces these LSD compounds, it is a symbiotic fungus helping the morning glory survive.
Amazing.
Think about every young person out there. The field of mycology is underfunded, understudied, underreported, underutilized. This is a fantastic treasure trove of new potential discoveries. I have long stated I think the field of mycology should be funded as well as the computer industry because it's so fundamental to the survival of our species. It's that big.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. Did you're aware of Brian Murray Rescue, right?
Yep.
That was one of the more fascinating things that they found in those when they studied those vases that they found ergot in them.
Yeah.
From the Eleusinian Mysteries.
Has Brian tripped yet?
I don't know. You have to ask him.
I love it when scientists and researchers don't admit that they've tripped. But I
don't know if it's a non-admission. I think in his case, he wanted to be objective, so he wanted to study these things without being. He's worried about being labeled as someone who's promoting them because they like it.
Well, an extreme example, but it has some merit. I mean, would you rather be taught by an airline pilot that has experience or someone who just read a book? Yeah. So the late Roland Griffiths, he's a dear friend, Johns Hopkins. He is credited as being the big pioneer for psilocybin in medical research. And when I asked him, have you tripped on psilocybin? That was when I was at his house in the backyard. He just smiled. He said, I'm not going to answer that question. Well, then after he died, I met some of his friends. And he goes, oh, yeah, Roland tripped. But he didn't want to tell anyone because for the fear that he could lose his objectivity or be criticized.
Yeah. Rick Strassman had an interesting perspective on that, too. When I first met him, he was very reluctant to talk about DMT experiences that he had personally because he had run those FDA studies that were documented in DMT, the Spirit Molecule, the book.
He was very reticent to talk about it, and then he sort of came out of the closet on that.
Fully.
And then when I asked Roland's friends, well, where did he like to trip? Because you're in a hospital environment with all these doctors and, your stress levels go up just being in a hospital environment. And he said, well, Roland's favorite place to trip was on a mountaintop with 3 friends with a beautiful view and a fire.
Perfect.
Perfect. What's the quality of experience? Now, again, this is for healthy normals, not people who need to have medical assistance, but there's some very good psychotherapists out there and psychonauts in the psychedelic assisted therapy movement. The California Institute for Integrative Studies, CIIS, I think .org or .eu, has a program training psychedelic therapists. You don't have to be a physician to be able to hold someone's hand to have a guided experience. Now, there's a lot of charlatans out there.
That's a problem, right?
Be warned, folks. There's a lot of problems.
That is a problem.
But there are some excellent therapists out there. And for many people who can't get into a clinical study, be careful. Consult a qualified medical practitioner. I'm going to put that on the record. But a lot of people have benefited without having to go through traditional medical, constructs of a hospital,
right,
to have benefit.
And then they're reluctant to talk about it because of the illegality of it, unfortunately. And if you have a job that is where you have to be taken seriously,
you could lose your medical license. Yeah. But the University of Washington, Anthony Back published a clinical study on using psilocybin for physicians and nurses who were emotionally harmed and distressed by people angry at them because of COVID in the hospital. And they were spit upon and they were attacked viciously, physically sometimes, in the hospital. They had PTSD for just trying to provide good medical support. So he did a clinical study that was published this last year showing the benefits, because the nurses and physicians, when they get out of the system, they can't provide medical care. Society loses. So they were able to reconcile the emotional harm that they experienced from angry patients and being assaulted, and they were able to then return, many of them, back into the medical profession, with a, healing from that. So realize aggression and anger affects everyone around you. Mm-hmm. The advantage of psilocybin, I think, just like a pebble in the pond of a tragedy creates ripples of distress throughout society. When someone who is highly adversely affected, angry and violent and all these antisocial behaviors, when they suddenly switch just like that, it's a pebble in the pond of positivity. A great example, a law enforcement officer by the name of Sarko from Boston just received his religious exemption for using psychedelics. So he is a police officer, and his chief of police is now retired. He has been an advocate because he saw Sarko, who experienced all these negative. You'd love to have him on the show sometime. He can really speak authoritatively to other law enforcement officers, saying, this has helped me. So I have a law enforcement officer.
I'd love to talk to him.
I'd love to for you. He's the real deal. I have a RCMP officer friend in Vancouver who took me to his favorite psilocybin mushroom shop in Vancouver. I couldn't believe it. We walked in this psilocybin mushroom shop. They didn't know who I was, thankfully. And they were selling the stem of stack, which is kind of weird because I had my name on it. And we walk in there and say, this is where I tell all my law enforcement officers to come to get their psilocybin. I go, really? I said, I'm sorry, but I'm trying to juxtaposition this, how does this work? And he goes, well, this is good perhaps for ICE also. He said, you know how, in the United States, law enforcement officers are aggressive and mean. They tend to intimidate you and, subjugate you. I said, we found a better way up here, and it's through psilocybin. I said, well, what do you do? He says, well, we have learned the following. Now when I have to arrest somebody, I know they have a warrant out for them. I walk up to them, and I say, and I always walk up with a smile on my face. Never a harsh look, always a smile on my face. And I said, I have good news and I have bad news. What do you want to hear first? He said, invariably, everyone wants to say, tell me the good news. And he goes, the good news is you can finish your cup of coffee. And I go, okay, what's the bad news? Dude, I got to arrest you. And he goes, the amount of cooperation and the reduction of the threat level for the safety of the law enforcement and the cooperation that they get in the squad car when these people that are just shooting the shit with law enforcement officers, I know you're doing your job, but wow, thank you for being so nice arresting me. You know? He said it's a game changer. It's reduced the threat to us physically of making arrests.
It makes sense. It doesn't escalate.
Yeah, it doesn't escalate. They de-escalate it.
Yeah.
And he goes, you won't believe the things I learned, from these people you're arresting now, who tell me things they've never have gotten out of an interrogation, but they were so respected. And the fact that they had to do their job without becoming adversarial.
Yeah.
Note to self, right? Note to everyone right now.
Note to everyone. And all conflicts involve two or more people. It's not just this is the only way to react to something.
Yeah.
It's how you react, how they react to your reaction. There's a cascading effect.
Well, I have great faith in humanity. I do too. I have seen the best. I mean, I've seen people.
Most people are great.
Most people are great, and they're better when they go through a psilocybin experience that amplifies the best of people, and it also helps them resolve a lot of the baggage. You can think of the inflammatory actions of the anger, and you did something, and you don't want to tell anybody, but you're haunted by that.
Yeah.
You inadvertently harmed somebody. And you went off the deep end, you harmed somebody else. It's a cascading event of harm.
Yeah.
And when these people are resolved going, that was a bad chapter in my life. I had one really bad day, or maybe a series of them, but that does not define me, who I am as a person. I have a better self, and it's now and in the future.
Right.
It's not in the past.
Yeah, that's the perspective we should all have, and that's the thing that we should all strive for. Be the best version of you that you can be.
Yep.
And we've all made terrible mistakes in the past, but the idea is to have learned from them and to be a better person because of that.
Well, the medical community has come together on this, on psychedelics. The law enforcement community has come together.
It's positive.
It's positive.
We're in a positive direction.
I had my interview by the DEA, and I thought they were the boogeyman in the 70s for good reason, by the way, but I shouldn't say that. But I went through my background check, and the DEA has such a sense of humor. They said, "Okay, Paul, you come out clean. You don't have a record. Everything is fine, but we have to talk to you about something that happened in 1994 in Des Moines, Washington."
Really?
Yeah. I'm going, what happened in 1994 in Des Moines, Washington? He said, "Are you sure you don't remember?" And they're role playing here. I didn't know it at the time. No, I don't remember. I wonder if sometimes people just confess to something that because they're fishing. I don't know. I said, I have no clue. He goes, "Are you sure? This is your official response. You don't remember." I said, "No, I don't remember." He says, "Didn't you get a speeding ticket?" And I said, "I paid that. It was from those machines. It was from my camera. I know I paid it. I could dig up the receipt. It was like $35." And they just roared with laughter.
They're just fucking with you.
They're fucking with me. What they told me is that we don't know shit about mushrooms or psilocybin. We're an enforcement agency. Many of us don't agree with us. Change the law. We want to go after syndicates.
Yeah.
We want to go after fentanyl.
Right.
We want to go after these
things that are not beneficial in any way,
right.
shape, or form.
So we don't want to hurt the source that is healing us.
Right.
But they won't fuck around when it comes to money transactions.
Right.
Once you involve money, then the DEA is going to be involved.
Right.
But you're involved in research, and we have strict guidelines. I had a DEA license in 1975, 1976, 77, and 78 through Dr. Mycology at the Everett State College, and they were much more liberal. I could grow tons of psilocybin mushrooms and collect them, and that's why we did a series of conferences. I was the only one that had a DEA license, so we did these conferences collecting all these experts together with Albert Hofmann there, R. Gordon Wasson, Richard Evans Schultes, Jonathan Ott, Terrence McKenna. But I had the license to be able to possess psilocybin with my professor, and so we would have all the psilocybin. So we did these educational events, academic with citizen scientists and psychonauts coming together. But it's really different. Is we just had for the psychedelic science MAPS conference in Denver, 8,500 people. Back in the 1970s, at any moment, we were afraid that a SWAT team would break down the doors and arrest everybody. We existed in a high state of paranoia because that was a war on drugs with Richard Nixon. And now it's totally different. Now you have law enforcement officers. You have Rick Perry. You have all these in New Mexico. They legalized the prescription of psilocybin. Mm-hmm. This is a citizens' movement. It's a democratic movement for the freedom of consciousness, and everyone should have a right to be able to practice. And where do you draw individual use from religious use? Psilocybin mushrooms are very important for my own personal religion. I feel that this is central to my religious belief. So I think this is where the government needs to back off. If you're using it for your spiritual development, whether you're Buddhist or Christian or Islamic, or Judaic, this informs your spirituality, reduces crime, it reduces harm, reduces, potential for violence. This is a game changer. I think we're in the psilocybin revolution, and psilocybin mushrooms are fundamentally different than MDMA. And ibogaine, just because ibogaine's so long and there's heart issues, I just think this is a medicine for our times that can make a paradigm shift for a better society.
I couldn't agree more. That's a good way to end this. Thank you, Paul. Hold your book up there, because this is the latest of 8 books that you've written.
Yeah,
Psilocybin mushrooms in their natural habitats. Paul, you're a gem. You really are. You're such an important person. And I think through the conversations that you and I have had, and then you've had on many other podcasts as well, millions and millions of people have gotten to understand what this is really all about. And I think your role in educating people is enormous.
But let's be very careful with that. I'm a one knowledge keeper, literally in a string of knowledge keepers.
Yes.
So many people have died, been harmed, and indigenous people. I am carrying the torch, and I want to pass this torch with pride, with dignity, with respect, with kindness, with positivity to the next generation. The next generation needs to be empowered with this, and they can do an excellent job knowing what's happened in the past and foretelling what we could be in the future, the best of the best.
I think you're doing just that. So thank you. I appreciate you very much, brother.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Bye, everybody.